Tonight, and two of the most powerful nations on Earth are sitting across from each other at a table in Beijing. No guns, no missiles, no tanks, just numbers, tariffs, chips, soybeans, and the fate of the global economy hanging in the balance. For nearly a decade, the United States and China have been waging a war that most people never fully see, fought not on battlefields, but in trade corridors, semiconductor labs, and diplomatic backchannels. And right now, in May 2026, something just shifted, but the full story is far more complicated. To understand what's happening right now, you have to go back. For years, the United States and China maintained an uneasy economic codependency. China made things, America bought them. The world called it globalization. Analysts called it inevitable. Then in 2018, that arrangement began to unravel. The United States imposed sweeping tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, accusing Beijing of unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, and state subsidies that tilted the playing field. China fired back. Tariffs on both sides climbed. Supply chains trembled. By the height of the escalation, the US had imposed tariffs that reached as high as 145% on certain Chinese imports. China retaliated in kind. Global markets watched and worried. But this was never just about soybeans and steel. At the centre of this conflict lies something far more strategic: technology. Specifically, the semiconductors that power artificial intelligence, military systems, and the next generation of economic dominance. The United States has been systematically cutting off China's access to the most advanced chips in the world, restricting exports of Nvidia's most powerful GPUs, pressuring allies to do the same, and building what analysts describe as a technology wall around American innovation. Beijing, for its part, has been quietly building its own tools of economic leverage, rare earth minerals that American industry depends on, manufacturing capacity that the West still hasn't fully replaced, and new legal mechanisms designed to push back against what China calls long-arm jurisdiction. Then, in October 2025, something shifted. President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in Busan, South Korea, a summit that surprised observers on both sides. The meeting produced a tentative thaw. Tariffs were walked back. Agricultural deals were struck. Trump began publicly referring to the two nations as the G2. But the truce was fragile. Even as diplomats shook hands in Seoul, Washington was announcing new probes into Chinese industrial overcapacity and forced labour. Beijing was rolling out new economic security regulations, tools that analysts say were designed specifically to blunt American pressure and give China greater leverage over US companies operating on Chinese soil. And then, China blocked Meta's acquisition of Manus, an AI startup with Chinese roots. A signal, some analysts suggested, that Beijing intended to use regulatory power as a weapon in this economic chess match. In March 2026, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent flew to Paris, to the headquarters of the OECD, to meet Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng. The agenda: tariffs, rare earths, technology export controls, and agricultural purchases. It was the beginning of a new diplomatic chapter. And by May 14th, 2026, Donald Trump was sitting in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, across from Xi Jinping, for a summit that analysts were already calling a defining test for the world's G2 power dynamic. What came out of that meeting was striking: a new agricultural trade deal, with China committing to purchase at least $17 billion per year in US agricultural products through 2028. A deal built not on volume, but on dollar value. A subtle but meaningful shift in how these two economies are learning to negotiate. So what does all of this actually mean? First, the technology front. This is where the deepest tensions remain. In January 2026, Washington approved the sale of Nvidia's H200 and AMD's MI3 25X GPUs to China, chips that are advanced but not the most powerful available. The US Bureau of Industry and Security attached conditions designed to ensure China's computing capabilities don't surpass American ones. It's a delicate balance. sell enough to keep American companies profitable and China engaged, but not enough to give Beijing an edge in the AI race that could define the next century. Military analysts and economists describe this as selective decoupling. The US and China are not pulling apart entirely. They are carefully, deliberately, surgically separating in areas deemed strategically critical while maintaining commercial ties elsewhere. The numbers reveal the complexity. China's exports in Q1 2026 grew 14% year on year, with double-digit growth in developing markets and a shift toward higher value goods. This is a China that is adapting, redirecting and building alternative markets even as it negotiates with Washington. Meanwhile, Justin Feng, Asia economist at HSBC, pointed out something that gets to the heart of why neither side can truly walk away. The United States, China and the European Union now account for 60% of global GDP. When these three economic giants are in conflict, the entire world feels it. Supply chains fracture, prices rise, smaller economies are forced to choose sides. And rare earths, those critical minerals used in everything from electric vehicles to fighter jets, remain a quiet but powerful card in Beijing's hand. Access to these materials is something American industry cannot easily replace, and both sides know it. Here is what keeps analysts awake at night. The truce is real, but it is not guaranteed. Every deal struck between Washington and Beijing has come with conditions, timelines and political pressures on both sides that could unravel it at any moment. New US probes into Chinese labour practices and industrial policy are already on the table. Beijing's new economic security regulations signal that China is not simply accommodating American demands, it is building the tools to resist them. And somewhere beneath the diplomatic language of stabilisation and extended truces, the fundamental competition has not changed. Both nations want to lead the world in artificial intelligence. Both want to control the supply chains of the future. Both believe their system, their model of governance and economic organisation, is the one that should shape what comes next. After 9 turbulent years, Trump and Xi have met, shaken hands and signed agreements. But the structural forces driving this rivalry, technological competition, security fears, domestic political pressures, have not disappeared. They have merely been managed for now. The question is not whether tensions will return. The question is what form they will take and whether the world's 2 largest economies have learned enough from the last decade to keep those tensions from becoming something far more dangerous. Closing. We are living through one of the most consequential economic rivalries in modern history. And unlike the Cold War of the 20th century, this one is not defined by walls and missiles. It is defined by microchips, trade deals, and the quiet power of who controls the technologies the world will depend on. The summit in Beijing may mark a turning point, or it may be one chapter in a much longer story, a story that is still being written. In boardrooms and trade ministries and semiconductor factories from Silicon Valley to Shenzhen, the deals are signed, the tariffs have shifted, the diplomats are talking, but the competition, the deep structural generational competition, of course, continues. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Is this the beginning of a genuine reset between the world's 2 largest economies, or simply the latest pause in a rivalry that has no end in sight? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you want to go deeper on any part of this story, the semiconductor war, the rare earths crisis, or what this means for the rest of the world, drop it below. I'll cover it next.